but it's just understanding inflation, and it doesn't always make sense. And so we're trying to manipulate inflation where pressure is pushing out on all sides of the product and in an equal amount, and we're trying to manipulate that to create a shape. And so when you size a boat in a certain specific way, it changes other parts of the inflation. And so that part, it just seems like it would be so easy. I'm going to add length to this boat and everything else will be the same. And it's not that way.
Wow. That's really interesting because it's true innovation. Like you think of building a car or something, and I'm sure they come up with ways to do it better, but probably everybody builds cars the same way, and everybody builds like puffy jackets the same way. But this is like a whole new, completely new design process in the last 20 years, basically, that nobody's ever done like this.
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Light your fire by the river, sleep on the ground. Ramble, 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 it's the only way back home. See the crows come and tell your story to the smoke. What can't hold itself up on the land, I say, let it go.
Hello and welcome to A Beginner's Guide to Packrafting and Bike Rafting. My name is Lizzie Scully and I'm your host. I own and operate Four Corners Guides, an instructional guide service, with my husband, Steve Fastbinder, aka Doom. We live at our base camp, Skullbinder Ranch, a 35-acre desert wonderland that borders Mesa Verde National Park and the Ute Mountain Ute Tribal Park. Doom and I also authored the Bikeraft Guide, a history of, wild adventure stories about, and how-to guide for aspiring bike rafters. I started this podcast late in 2023 as a way to share stories and information and to offer guidance to folks getting into pack rafting, bike rafting, ski rafting, or any of the other activities that include these funny little inflatable boats. I also just like talking with cool people. I've had some really interesting conversations with Luke Mell, Jewel Harl, Jeff Creamer, Thad Farrell, among others. And we've talked about everything from packraft fly fishing to women in pack rafting to risk management and healing from sports trauma. Today, for episode 11, we are talking with Dustin Partridge, a design engineer at Alpacka Raft. Dustin is founder and designer Sheri Tingey's right-hand man, and he has been integral to the development of Alpacka's latest and greatest accomplishments, including version 3 of the Valkyrie and this year's wonder boat, the Mage. We talk more about both those boats later in the podcast. We also review Dustin's journey from making all the parts of a pack raft, to sewing his first full boat, to making and cutting patterns, to engineering patterns using computer-aided design, and finally to the different ways he influences boat building and design at Alpacka. I really enjoyed this conversation, and as Dustin says, we only just barely touched the surface of the world of packraft design and the magical ways packraft designers manipulate inflation to make these incredibly capable whitewater boats. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did.
I come to believe the harvest depends on what
I've been doing this podcast for the past year, and this is going to be the 11th episode. And would you just introduce yourself and your position here at Alpacka for me?
My name is Dustin Partridge, and I am the design engineer for Alpacka Raft.
Okay, and what exactly does that mean?
My main responsibilities are being in charge of the patterns. So every pattern for every single thing that we make, I put together on the computer, and I'm in charge of it. I'm in charge of making all the changes to all of the designs that go within those patterns. I'm also in charge of making things manufacturable.
What does that mean?
So, we come up with a concept or an idea. A boat is a great example. We come up with this idea for a boat, and we put a pattern together, and we make prototypes, and we get it to a stage that we like, and we think it's a viable product, and then we make it production worthy. And what I mean by that is fine-tuning how all the pieces fit and how someone might sew it together, how someone might tape it together or put the floor on. So there's a lot of steps in terms of making a boat that require my input or someone's input to be able to put it together easily and efficiently within the production flow, I guess is the word I would use.
Okay, so you and Sheri and Thor work on, or who could, tell me of that process actually. I'm curious. You come up with an idea and then you build prototypes and then you translate it for the builders?
Yeah, essentially that's what happens. The process starts with anyone can have an idea. Anyone in the whole company can have an idea. We take that idea, whether it's from Thor or Sheri or myself or someone else.
Like some of the people who test the boats?
Sure. Yeah, testers or even just people who are flooring the boats might have ideas on how, maybe not an idea on a boat that we should make, but they definitely have ideas on how we should make it, how they should floor it or how things come together in terms of that process.
Mm-hmm. So improving on ideas because they've done it so much to improve on how you guys put it together?
Yeah, because I'll just use flooring as the example. Those guys floor boats every single day, and so they know where the efficiencies are or inefficiencies are. So they can come talk to me and say, hey, this works really well. Can we make these changes to these other boats or try, this idea? Without going into too much detail, but they might have an idea and let's try this, and that's yeah, go for it, try it, let me know what you think, and then we can implement it across the board with all of the other folks that are flooring boats as well.
Wow, that's something I never thought about that. So that's probably not something that would happen if you sent your design off to a foreign country and they would build it in-house there, or would that...
I don't have a lot of experience, almost none, building things overseas. But from my understanding and talking to people within the industry, that is the limitation. But they come up with ways to, the factory would come up with a way to make the product, so that they're making money off of the product that they're making and shipping back to the U.S. for, Osprey, as an example. Osprey has their stuff made in, I believe, Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So they send a design. I've talked to one of the designers before, and so he has a design. He sends it over there. They make a prototype. They send it back to him. They make changes, but it's ultimately within that process, they come up with a way to make this product, and then, the company figures out the efficiencies on how to make it, and within the scope of the design and the parameters that surround the design, and then the product comes back. We here at Alpacka have full control over that process because we make everything in-house. Everything is made right here in Mage, and so we can make changes very quickly in line with the production process. So if we come out with a new boat and we're having, issues with the markings for RF welding, I can make those changes immediately and see results on the next cut. So it's a very quick process, and it feels good just to be able to control it and to get things done quickly and not have to wait.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't really thought about it that way, but because it's interesting because being the marketing person, until now, before when I was the marketing person years ago, I remember them talking about this, making it in real time, but it actually is just now sinking into my brain, oh, right. The people who do the floor, can they find something new and better, and then they can tell you, and you who oversees everything all the time, like you said, can make the changes in real time or discuss with Sheri or whatever. I mean, it's I don't want to make a comparison good or bad, but it just makes sense to me now. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it's not good or bad. It's just what we want to be in charge of here.
Yeah.
So that puts more responsibility on me as the designer or the folks who are putting the boats together. There's more responsibility on them to come up with a process that works. Whereas I'm guessing if you were making things overseas, you're not as part of that process.
Yeah. Or you're, just removed from it a little bit.
But that's just a guess. I don't have a lot of experience there, so I can't really comment. It's from what I hear and what I've experienced talking to other folks. is what I can speak to.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That's interesting.
I wanted to get back to your question though, your earlier question, because you asked like how the process works around here. And so, a lot of times we, as in maybe Thor, because Thor's the CEO and he does a lot of market research, and so, or he has his finger on the pulse of what's going on within the pack rafting industry in terms of what boats do people want and what products do people want, and then where are we deficient in meeting the demands of the market. And so with that comes, an idea of a boat. I'm just using boats as an example. There's all small parts and stuff that we make too, but a boat is an example. And, I'll use the Refuge as the one boat, because years ago we were like, we don't have a boat that's fairly capable to run what we would call light water, which is just easy, flat water, but some splashy stuff. But also that boat needs to be able to, you need to be able to carry that boat across landscapes, meaning backpacking mostly, or bike packing, so we came up with this boat, because we don't have that boat. And so then we came up with this idea and this concept, and let's build this boat, which became the Refuge. So it's pretty light. It's not great for whitewater, but you can run some easy class 2 in it. If you're really good, you could run class 3 in it. Mm-hmm. But, so now we have a concept that we need, we build the boat, and now it's out there, and then we get feedback, and then we make changes to it.
But not all, because having worked with Sheri in the past, it's not all new boat ideas start from market research. A lot of boat ideas just start because, what was it, the predecessor to even the narwhal and the wolverine, Alpacka.
Yeah, you were talking about the Alpacka.
Yeah, because it wasn't that, that was just something, I guess it came from, do you know more about that?
Yes, I do know more about that, but I want to maybe comment on what happens here. So my job is I take the concepts and make them production worthy. Mm-hmm. Sheri's skill set is completely innovation. Mm-hmm. So she's not necessarily working on a project. She is. For years she was working on what became the Valkyrie, and mm-hmm. It was the Alpacka before that. It was also called the Diva. It had multiple names of a project, but it was born out of the idea that we want to make a high-performance whitewater boat. So Sheri, for a decade, was working on this project, and eventually it became the Valkyrie.
Okay.
But so her focus was on the innovation side of things, and that's where the Valkyrie stern came from, is that Sheri had an idea through conversations with all of us, Thor and myself, and seeing what people need within the boats and looking at what's available. But she came up with this idea to put baffles in the stern and flatten it out. And then, that's her strength. Her strength is to innovate those types of things. Putting a thwart in the middle of the rendezvous is another thing that Sheri came up with. It's born out of a similar idea in terms of using baffles to shape the product. We just applied it in a different way.
And what is that? You said she put a
thwart?
Yeah.
Basically, it's a seat in the middle of the boat.
Okay.
But it's boat material. It's not a separate item. It is the boat.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's always, the design is multifaceted. There's always this innovation happening, and then there's also the market research that drives some design.
Yeah.
Okay. So design is a lot of different things.
Oh, it's all encompassing. It's so many different things, because there's the part of, we want to make whatever this thing, and we need to figure out how to make it. But then there's also the part of, we don't have a boat that fits this one industry or niche that people are involved in. And so let's build a boat that fits that, because the market is demanding it. But then there's also, we really like this cool idea, let's explore. So a lot of the ideas, especially the stuff that Sheri's worked on, there are probably, 50 of those ideas or more that never see the light of day, but they turn out, how do I explain this?
Do they morph into something else?
They do morph into something else, but they continue the momentum of the innovation. And so one idea, I mean, the Valkyrie stern did not look like the Valkyrie stern the first time Sheri put baffles in it. So it's like it took iterations to get there, but then it also morphed into this idea of, well, let's put baffles in this middle seat compartment on the Rendezvous. And so it just continues to drive the innovation. And so it might be in a project that you think about and you have a new idea and you're like, this is great, I love this, but it doesn't pan out and it doesn't go anywhere because it's not production worthy, it doesn't fit what you're doing. So you put it on a shelf and 2 years later it comes back up and you're like, oh, remember when we did this thing? Well, we could put it in this new boat or this new product, and all of a sudden those ideas sometimes get shelved but come back to life, and sometimes they never see the light of day, but they foster new ideas that we can build upon and actually use in a product.
That's so cool. So really, like, for example, Sheri's innovative ideas can live on for, like, say, God forbid, but like say everybody dies eventually, but when she does, like, her ideas will like live way beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, her ideas live within me now.
Oh, tell me about that.
They live within Alpacka, but they also live within me because Sheri's been my mentor for the last 7 or 8 years.
I really want to hear about this. I want to hear and I'm going away from my pet questions, but whatever. I'll go back to them at some point. But I really do want to hear about your, like, when you first got to Alpacka, and then how yours and Sheri's relationship developed and what you've become from that.
Yeah. I guess that goes back to my background. My background is I have a degree in mechanical engineering, and prior to working at Alpacka, I had made a backpack. I hadn't made much, but I had made a backpack, and I was very interested in learning how to make more stuff like that, backpacks, tents, and it was stuff that I was working on the side. But it was like small projects, nothing big. I wasn't trying to do anything with it. I was just trying to make stuff for myself.
Because you were curious.
Just curious. And I have a degree in engineering. I like making things. I like working with my hands. This satisfied my curiosity, learning how to work with fabrics and sew. And I mean, the first thing I ever made, I just used my mom's home sewing machine and made a backpack and went and hiked the Continental Divide Trail with it and was like, oh, this blew out this seam over here and I had to restitch it together, or this concept idea that I put together worked really well, so why don't I continue to make more stuff for myself? That's fun. But with that process, I had some experience, is what I'm getting at, doing that type of stuff. But Alpacka was looking for someone to floor boats. And so I got a call because I had already applied with Sheri, having met her and was interested in working here. And 6 months later, after I had talked to her, I get a call and it was, hey, are you still interested in a job? I was like, yeah, definitely. Like, when can I get there? Like, when do you want me to come down? I was like, right now? And she was like, maybe like an hour from now. And I was like, okay. So I came down, I interviewed with Sheri and Aaron and Thor, and they hired me on the spot. But they hired me to floor boats. I expressed interest in doing design work at some point in time, but Alpacka was really small. I think I was the 16th employee when they hired me, like the 16th person here. So there wasn't a need for someone to be doing full-time design work. I mean, Sheri was doing that work. And so, yeah, I floored boats for 6 months.
And what year was this?
2016.
Okay.
Yeah, I floored boats for 6 months, and then during the winter we were really slow, and so I learned how to use the bar tacker, and then I learned how to make the back bands and do some simple sewing, and then through that process of being here, we had a bunch of seconds fabrics that were underneath the cutting table. So a big project that Sheri and I worked on was taking all this like scrap fabric and turning it into boats. So I learned about the patterns of the boats and like how you cut them and how you sew them and how you tape them. So it was really just an iterative process for me learning all of the steps on how the boats went together. It was never we need you to learn all these things and we're going to train you on them. It just happened fluidly because we're a small company and most people did multiple things.
And you wanted to learn.
And I wanted to learn, so I was very eager to like continue to do that stuff. And that's more or less how it all turned out. What ended up happening is that Sheri needed some help on some really simple design ideas, like simple manufacturing, like seat sleeves. That was the first thing she asked me to work on, was, hey, can you do these seat sleeves? And I take a look at them and I'm like, man, our boats are sized one way, but the seat sleeves aren't sized similarly. So what is going on? And so it just took a lot of questions and a lot of deep diving to figure out that we need to size things appropriately, like scale them well compared to the size of the boat. And so all of a sudden I had an input and just made some simple changes. And then it just morphed into me helping Sheri more full time as time went on. I mean, I still had production responsibilities, but I was also doing things for Sheri on the side.
And then when did it turn into more full time?
Man, I don't really know. It just, yeah.
It seemed like while I was there that was happening, because you moved up into that little upper area. It seems like, I don't know.
I would say, to be honest, it really became a full-time job when we got our automatic cutting machine. So prior to that, all the patterns were hand cut. They're made out of Mylar. And so I remember one project I had was remaking all the patterns for all the boats for the new models and cleaning up all the old patterns and, just making them nice so that we could use them, because some of them are old and held together with tape and just, it's just a small operation just trying to make stuff. And so we invested some time in remaking all the patterns. And so I had to like mark them and create them and cut them out, and then we could use them. Mm-hmm. But then we got this automatic cutting machine. And so everything went from being like plastic patterns hanging on a rack to we need everything digitized. And so I had a lot of experience from a previous job doing CAD work. And so this was just very simple for me to create 2D patterns and fine tune it. And this opened up a whole host of things that we could do to make the boats more production worthy and increase like our quality output.
Huh, okay.
Because all of a sudden, instead of stack cutting 30 layers of boat fabric, we were using a cutting machine. And so everything was like very accurate in terms of the tolerances with each of the patterns. But like one thing we did was add notches to the boat panels. So it's like, these panels fit together right at the notches. So instead of sewing two boat panels together that are, however long, and you start at one end and you get to the other end and all of a sudden you're off an inch. Now we have notches spaced, every 6 or 7 inches, and it's like, okay, I'm right on the notch, or I'm off, so I can make adjustments. And so all of a sudden now the boats go together really well.
Right, it just made things more efficient.
Yeah.
Much more efficient, and therefore making your boat making and boat production more efficient, but then also probably accelerating the ability to improve on boats and to make new boats.
Yeah, our quality went through the roof when that happened. It increased greatly. And I think that's one of the best things that's happened from a design perspective is now, you order, anything that we make that comes off the cutting table is exactly like everything else that we make coming off the cutting table.
So I want to know more about your relationship with Sheri and how that mentorship evolved.
Yeah. What do you want to know?
Well, I know she's like, I remember her being like a mad professor, and like I would be in there and she'd walk in and, she'd like leave her jacket on the counter and she'd just leave this here and then she'd just go and then she'd just be focused and she would be like, so like, yeah, what's it like? She's brilliant, obviously. So how is it?
I mean, she's a genius. She just has so many great ideas and they just come out of nowhere. You just really don't know where these things come from. I think she would tell you that she just dreams them up in the middle of the night, which is true. in a lot of ways, our working relationship has allowed her to do what she does best. And it has allowed me to help Alpacka get to where it is today in terms of like high quality product, easy to make, trying to keep, because we're trying to make things efficiently and keep costs down. It's a premium product, but we're trying to make it well and quickly and efficiently. And that's to be honest, that's not Sheri's strength. Sheri's strength is innovation, coming up with concepts and ideas and pattern making. And I take all of that pattern stuff and I fine tune it, I clean it up. Sheri likes to say I take her chicken scratch and like make it into something. I mean, she's underselling what she's actually doing, but yeah, so it's been a really great relationship because with me helping her, she can focus on the stuff that she's really good at, and then I can help Alpacka make a really quality product because we just haven't had a person that's been able to do that for pretty much the entire time Alpacka's been around.
That's so interesting and very cool that it happened so organically, and there was never a like, this is going to happen. But then, I mean, they probably hired you for because you have some certain background, right?
To be fair, Sheri more or less stole me. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's just like Sheri sees the need, she sees what I'm capable of. I mean, the one winter that I was here, the first winter I was here, I was literally cutting scrap webbing. So I was cutting scrap webbing and making it into usable sizes for things that we make. But we just had this giant bin full of like scrap that no one had ever gone through. And Sheri looks at me doing this stuff and was like, this is a waste of talent. Yes, somebody needs to cut the scrap webbing. And I will do anything. If the job needs to get done, I'm going to do it. But at the same time, I'd be better served making patterns on the computer and working on fine-tuning patterns and design and creating things than I am, in terms of cutting webbing.
Right.
I'm not trying to undersell the job and that needs to happen.
Different people are good at different things, and you recognize what people are really good at and then uplift them by giving them that work and then teaching them more on top of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, cutting webbing is a great job for an intern, someone who doesn't have a lot of experience working at a company, doesn't have a lot of experience working with other people. So all of a sudden, that's it's a simple job, but it helps foster development for someone who needs that.
Right.
I was well beyond that at that stage of my life. And so it just made sense for Sheri to be like, hey, come work on this thing with me. And it just was very organic in that nature because she just continued to involve me in what she was working on. And so that's the interesting thing. I get to ask this all the time about my experience boating before I started working at Alpacka. And my experience was close to zero. And so I didn't do a lot of boating. So I had done a little bit of canoeing. I had done one trip, down the Dolores in a Packraft, or a ducky. That was a ducky trip. My very first trip was with Doom, and I went down Westwater in a Packraft. And so I didn't know any better at the time. People tell me, and I've obviously floated Westwater since then, but at the time people were like, whoa, that's kind of hard, isn't it? And I was like, I just didn't know any better. But I'm just very adventurous.
And Doom.
Yeah.
Sandbagging.
Yeah. Oh, totally sandbagging me because he just handed me the skirt, didn't tell me how this thing worked, didn't tell me how the boat inflated. It was you figure it out. And I don't know, I just was watching all the other people getting their boats set up, and I just didn't know. It was very interesting. Mike Kiriak was on that trip, actually. And I didn't know who he was at the time. I just knew he was a friend of Doom's. We're doing this trip. And he, before each of the rapids, would kind of give me the beta and tell me, hey, we're going to try and do this. And, he helped me along a lot. And he's become a really good friend of mine since then. So it's been kind of this cool thing where I went on this trip and didn't know anything about the boats and didn't know anything about packrafting. And then through my work here at Alpacka, I've learned how to use all the boats and how to paddle hard whitewater, and I've made lots of good friends and good connections of people like Mike and Doom who give me a lot of feedback in terms of what are the boats doing, what can I improve, how can Alpacka improve, how's all of those types of things, because the feedback it's not just like a one-way street. It's not just like me going out testing the boats saying, hey, this works great. I like need feedback from multiple users, multiple sizes of people, and multiple experiences. Like like Dan Thurber has a lot of experience running class 5 water, kayaking, so he comes from a kayaking background. And then there's like Doom, who's like a pack rafter, and has been a pack rafter since the beginning, doing like more bike packing type stuff, more adventure travel. And there's a whole host of people that are in between that have good feedback, people that are experienced, that have no experience. And so that feedback comes into play with like what boat we're making.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go to some of the questions now.
Yeah.
This has been awesome so far. You're also very good. You don't do or ah at all.
A few times, but
not barely at all. Oh, I'm like curious about.
Well, that's the thing. Design is like, before you go there, it's like there's so many facets to design, because I think most people think it's this like glamorous thing. Like, oh, I just innovated this brand new like idea and I put it together, but that part is part of design, but that's like so small in comparison. Sheri and I talk about it all the time. When you're designing a product, the last 5% of getting it ready for production takes 95% of the time.
Wow.
So, the concept is the simple part. It takes no time. You can come up with like a Valkyrie stern. I'm going to use the Valkyrie as an example. You can come up with a Valkyrie stern and it's like, oh, the concept's there. This is great. But fine-tuning all of the pieces and all the shaping and all the stern rocker and all the bow rocker, like how the boat actually comes together and the sizes of it all, that stuff takes forever. Fine-tuning all the notches and like how you attach the floor and all of that stuff, like all the patterns that go along with that it takes forever. It's a very, very, very long process. Like the Mage is a great example too. We're coming out with this new boat in January that it's such a phenomenal product and people are stoked on it because we've like teased it, and there's certain people that have one.
I think I've already sold at least 10.
This guy in New Zealand's been talking about it, and he's put some videos out, and man, it's really cool to hear the hype and the stoke on this boat. I've been paddling one all year, so it's been really cool to see it come together. We had the concept done, a long time ago. The concept was...
Steve had one last winter.
Yeah.
That you guys loaned him.
Yeah. So the concept was done. We knew what the boat was. We even knew like the shape and the size, but all the fine tuning that came with it was another 8 months of work.
Can I bring up something that he had said? Because he had taken a version of one on the Grand Canyon, I think, and he said when it was full, it was like awesome, but then when this particular version of it was empty, it was like impossible to paddle. Like, how does that happen?
Well, that's the funny thing. His grand trip was a week after my grand trip, and we brought the same boats. So we figured this boat, the concept's great. Let's make a few of these boats. Let's get them on a couple of grand trips. And on a self-support grand trip, you're carrying quite a bit of gear, upwards of 100 pounds at the start. And so the boat handles so much differently when you have 100 pounds of gear in it as compared to having 30 pounds of gear at the end of a trip, as compared to running some laps at 205 rapid with no gear in the boats, because it's easier to carry up to the top. And we found the same thing. It was just, that boat with weight in it was phenomenal. We all thought the project was done already. It was just like that good. We were just like so stoked. We're like, this boat's awesome. Like, there's no changes. We don't need to do anything with this boat. And then we took all the weight out and go run a few laps on 205 rapid, and not one person made it down the rapid upright.
Oh my God.
And so it's just
But then how do you figure out a solution to that? Like, do you, because you know the boat so well, know what could possibly cause that?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of it had to do with the stability, primary versus secondary stability, sit height, paddler position. There's so many factors. And so the original boat that we made is a far cry from what it is today. It's gone through, major overhaul.
By the way, I always have my seat only half inflated.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, like,
I never thought about telling you that until right now. Oh.
no. Yeah. But, which is good. That's great because you're right in the zone. Jeff Kramer, who's maybe a slightly smaller person than I am, maybe by like 5 or 10 pounds. I mean, he paddles it with no seat inflation, and then I paddle with full seat inflation.
Really?
Yeah. So we try to set it up so that seat is right there in the middle that will cover 75 to 95% of the people.
Oh, because the size of the person and the weight of the person. So
Yeah.
it's not just the size of the boat correlating to the size of the person. It's like,
I mean, that is part of it, but we figured out with the Valkyrie that you need to have, I mean, and it's very obvious, you need to have your heels below your hips. And so that sit height matters. And so, that sit height also matters in terms of like, well, if you're sitting very high up in the boat, it's easier for your center of gravity is higher up. Therefore, the boat can get on edge or flip over much easier than if you had dropped your center of gravity and sat much lower on the boat. And so we try, the seat is there for comfort, but it is also there to allow you to have the correct sit height that works for your paddling style.
oh, okay. That's why. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Jeff and I are like the same size person, and he paddles it with no seat inflation, and I paddle it with full seat inflation because we both handle the boats a little differently.
Right.
And the Valkyrie was the same way.
I never tried the Valkyrie, mostly because I was afraid of it. Because I think I would not be now. But can you talk a little bit about the difference between the Valkyrie and the Mage? Because sure. I am getting a lot of questions. So
I mean, the major difference, well, there's two major differences. One is tube diameter. The other is the stern shape. And with the Valkyrie, we have made a more advanced floor. So we call it a shaped floor. The floor is made of, the outer floor is made of multiple pieces of fabric that we stitch and tape together and make waterproof. Whereas the Mage, we use a flat floor where the pad sits in the boat and the pad pushes the floor down.
Okay.
So we're creating a similar type of secondary stability, but we've made it much easier to manufacture on the Mage, and it doesn't perform as well as it does for the Valkyrie.
Okay. But, I mean, for me, it's like amazing. And so this is something else that comes up for me, and I have a hard time with it because I'm like, I think that the Mage is way more stable than the Wolverine, personally. But I keep hearing other people say that's not, but I'm just like, but it feels like it. But I know it's because I know how to edge, but won't.
Well, that's the difference. It's a primary versus secondary stability. So with a flat floor Packraft, like a Classic or an Expedition or a Wolverine, you sit in the boat is very stable. Just on flat water. You just sit in it. It does not want to rock side to side at all. It's very stable in a primary position. We call secondary stability is when you start to lean to one side and get on the edge of the boat. And so in a Wolverine, a Classic, Expedition, the only thing you have on the outside of the boat is a round tube. And so when you lean to one side, you're on a round object. And so the boat does not have a position where it feels stable. And so it requires a lot of, expertise, a lot of getting out and practicing to be able to hold that boat on an edge without flipping over.
Okay, so it is, all right. So I just apparently have become a decent boater because it does feel more stable to me.
Well, and so the Mage is intentionally more stable in a secondary stability position.
Than a Valkyrie, for example. Or just in general.
I mean, it's more stable than a Valkyrie because it's got bigger tubes.
Okay.
So you have a wider boat. And so with the bigger tubes, it's hard to get over the tube to flip, when you're flipping over. It's harder to get around that tube that's on the outside of your hip, where the Valkyrie's smaller, so it's easier to do that. But it also, on the Valkyrie, that increases your ability to get on edge and stay on edge and carve in and out of features of the river. So it makes the boat more playful and engaging. And if you're a good boater, then or have a lot of practice or want to grow into the capabilities of like a Valkyrie, then it allows you to do things that like the Mage can't quite do.
But the Mage is like such a perfect sweet spot for someone like me who has no class 5 aspirations, barely class 4 aspirations.
Yeah. And so, what I would recommend for most people, especially if you're a beginner, very beginner, just want to run some whitewater, a flat floor boat like a Valkyrie or like a Narwhal or an Expedition are great boats for that. But if you want to run whitewater and you're thinking that you're going to run a lot of whitewater and get good at it, then the Mage is a fantastic boat because it allows you to get on that secondary stability much easier without flipping over, and you can carve through features of the river as you're going downstream. And so it's a great boat that people can grow into, and it might feel unstable. So that's what I'm guessing is that people are saying, hey, it's not that stable. It's because it's not very stable in a primary position. When you just hop in the boat does want to edge side to side. If you lean just a little to your left, the boat's going to edge to your left. Lean to the right, a little bit to the right. But when it gets to that stable secondary position, it does not want to keep going. And so that makes it more stable and more friendly in whitewater environments.
That's awesome. So I did like a little video because I literally have had so many people ask me, why do you want the Mage? So I just made a video, but I'm not like technically inclined and I don't know all the details of the boat. So I was like, I don't know how this works, but I get on 2 edges and to me it feels more stable. But now I'm going to be able to say, okay, listen to this.
Yeah, and that's kind of funny because I put together a product video for the Mage that'll be on the website. On the product, and it's like, but it talks about like what the boat is, not why you necessarily want the boat over something else. Because it's like, the boat has a drop floor, it has this foot pillow attachment, it has 4-point thigh straps, it has this type of stern and bow, and these types of self-bailing holes. It's like, what is the product versus like this conversation? It's like, well, you want this boat over a Narwhal if you're trying to increase skill and get downstream with more engaging, what I would call fun. Some people might not feel that way, but that's how I feel.
Well, and this is like what I think about because we are constantly having people ask what types of boats they should be in, and I base what I tell people on what I know about them and what they tell me. Like I have a husband-wife that the husband's like, I really want to do class 3, and my wife, she's probably going to do class 1 in lakes, and so I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this boat, and we'll share it. And I'm like, well, eventually that's a great boat to start in, but probably you're going to want the Mage because you're like me. And that's pretty much like every single client I have, they're like, well, what should I use? Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like the Valkyrie is not great for heavy loads. So it's not like a great Grand Canyon boat or a long multi-day trip boat. But the Mage has got more volume. But then, the Valkyrie is a better boat for like creeking.
Yeah.
You have 20 pounds on the boat. It's very easy to maneuver. I mean, the Mage will do fine, but the Valkyrie is a better craft for that.
Yeah.
If that's where your skill level is.
Right. All right, let's go back to design. Thank you for that aside.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about boats all day, so.
I'm kind of curious about your innovations. Like, have you been able to innovate some specific things that you're really proud of here? And what was that process like?
I mean, we've been talking about one, and that's the Mage.
Oh, that's large part you.
Yeah, I mean, the concept was in conversations that Thor and I had. But that project is something that I took from the very beginning to the very end.
Dude, fucking awesome. Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah, I'm really proud of that project. And I'm really proud of the Valkyrie. I did a shit ton of work on that boat. Maybe this is an explicit podcast. I'm not supposed to use swear words.
Oh, no, I don't care. You can do whatever. Yeah, no, I don't think there's any.
No, but I did a ton of work getting that to be manufacturable. That boat couldn't have been made here at Alpacka, 6 years ago. And it can today.
Oh, wow. And is that in part because of the computer stuff? Also?
Yeah, that's a huge part. The tolerances, how the boat goes together. I don't want to give too much away about how we make it. Yeah. So.
I'm really interested in the processes and how you feel and think. And can you tell me more about the first time you were like, oh, we need a boat like the Mage, or how did that?
Yeah, I mean, the Refuge was an example too of a boat that I worked on. It was a concept that Sheri had. We basically copied a like super old boat. It's another one of those things where the boat had been made 10 years ago, and then here we are coming back to it, and it's like, oh, this is actually what we want it to be. And so once we have, and this is a lot of things like with Sheri, working with her, it's like once the basic concept's done, it's out of her hands and it's into mine. And so I do a lot of work, and I yeah, and to your point, I'm very proud of like all of the things that we have come out with as a result of that. You know, because like the Refuge, yeah, it wasn't necessarily my innovation, but I put it together and turned it into what it is.
And is it similar to like the flooring guys being, because they're always doing the floor, and they're like, well, you could do this better, and they come back to you. But it's similar because you like know how pieces go together or the strength of certain things, and you could be like, oh, well, this could work a little bit better this way, and you.
Yeah, I'm to that point. I'm very opinionated about how things should be done, like how the flooring guys should put things together. Opinionated in the way of like how I want them to work. Not them as the people, but how I want the product to work and how I want the pieces to fit together. So, I mean, that's part of it, is me being able to work with the flooring guys or the seam tech guys or the RF folks. You know, like they know how the machines operate and how to put things together, but I also have opinions on how I want it, I designed it, and how I expect it to go together. And those two things aren't always the same. And so I need to have a good relationship with all of the people that work here, because they're the ones who do this work day in and day out, and they're the ones who can help make the product better. Like they're literally making the boats. I don't make the boats, I make the prototypes.
But you do know how to.
No, I know how to do everything. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons it worked so well with me starting all this design stuff, is because when Sheri started giving me projects, I knew how to do everything in the shop except RF weld. And that was something that I ended up learning out of necessity, because all of the production guys were like working on production stuff. There'd be a free RF welder. And so instead of being like, hey, can you make this thing for me? Can you do this thing? It was like, hey, teach me how to use this machine. Like, give me a crash course. What are the formulas? How do I do this thing? And all of a sudden now I'm doing all of my prototyping. I'm not impacting production at all. And so as we were a smaller company, it made sense for me to do all that stuff. So I figured out how to do every single job in the shop.
You kind of made yourself invaluable.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess so.
But really not out of any sort of like, you know, whatever, I'm going to do this, but like, wow, this is really cool, and I want to learn this, and I'm learning more, and I'm getting these opportunities. And
yeah, of course, I want to know what the full capabilities are. So like that helps open up the scope of what can we design. That's
cool. You're answering tons of my questions without me even having to ask them.
Yeah. To be fair, the other cool product that I'm super proud of that we came out with last year is the adrenaline sled.
Oh, I've heard of this, but I don't. Yeah, tell me.
I mean, it's a snow sled.
Okay.
It's an inflatable snow sled, and that whole product came out of like a desire that I had. I had used something like similar, like 10 years ago, and I was like, man, I really want like an inflatable sled. Like this is super fun. I mean, I'm gonna go be a 6-year-old kid and go sled down the hill, you know, and built a prototype that worked for me, and I was like, this is great. And then it was this idea that I presented at one of our meetings. I said, hey, what if we just made this? And you know, and so there's like, well, what are the downsides? Is this thing going to break? Is there liability involved? You know, to Thor's point, he's right. This is the most dangerous thing that we've ever made. And it's just because people could get really hurt, like sledding into trees and things like that. You get really hurt on the river too, but I know where Thor's going with this whole.
Well, he's a lawyer.
Yeah, he is a lawyer. And so we were just like, you know what, for fun, it's for Christmas, let's make 50 of these things. And then we sold out within 12 hours, and then it was like, well, let's make 50 more. You know, and then we stopped there because we wanted to see, to be fair, we put the product out not knowing what the durability is other than my limited use the winter before. Yeah, it was just kind of a way to get the product out there and see what it is. And so we're going to come out with it again this year as well.
Cool. Did you get feedback on it from?
Yeah, all the feedback was positive.
Oh, cool.
Everyone who has one loves it. So it's been really cool to see some of the photos and some of the things people have been doing with them. I mean, it's great to tow your little, your child around in, and or if you want to bomb off 6-foot jumps, you can do that too.
How thick are they?
Like 5 inches.
Okay, so if you bomb off a big jump, you'll land pretty softly, sort of, relatively.
Totally.
So that's another thing about, like, when I was working at Alpacka, Sheri always would say, don't take yourself so seriously. Like, these are just like fun inflatable boats. Like, have fun. Like, so is there like some whimsy to Alpacka that also like makes you like working here?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I actually don't know how to answer that question. Yeah. Can you rephrase it in a different way?
Well, tell me about the different reasons that you like working here. I mean, obviously you have a really valuable relationship with Sheri, and you're learning a lot from her, and you get a lot from the people around you. But there is this like lightness to packrafting. I mean, some people take it seriously, right? But like,
yeah, I mean, you totally take it seriously if you're running hard stuff. But no, like, all jokes aside, like, you go run a river and you're in a packraft and you flip over, there's something about it it's the most joyous, like, fun time, even though you're in a maybe slightly stressful situation. It's just, there's something very childish about it. Very, like, it just pulls on those, like, that joyous laughter you have as a kid. Like growing up and going sledding outside, or just like going playing at the lake, and whatever, you're doing. That's not a great way to say that.
No, this totally resonates with me. Totally. Every single person I bring packrafting, with one exception, all day long, they're smiling.
Yeah.
Oh, 2 exceptions. But I've taken lots of people out packrafting, running a guide service, right?
Totally.
Like, people they're smiling and laughing all day.
Yeah. I've learned how to kayak since I've gotten into packrafting, and it feels like, kayaking feels like it's all business to me, whereas packrafting does not feel like that at all. And a lot of it is the consequences of what can happen for me when I flip over. If I flip over in a kayak and I don't have my roll dialed, I'm now my boat's flooded and I have to get it to shore, and I don't feel comfortable or safe. But I feel like I can run hard whitewater in a packraft because the boat's going to stay afloat. I can hold on to it and get right back in and get to shore, no issues. Like, I feel a lot safer in a lot of ways for packrafting, in a packraft compared to a kayak.
Yeah, and they're a lot more stable generally too.
Yeah, and so maybe I can't go punch through some big features and run things that are harder, but I don't really need to either. I've found like my level of comfort that I'm happy with, and I'm happy to continue learning how to kayak and improve my skills. But at the same time, I'm happy to go run flat water in a packraft down the San Juan River and just have a joyous time with my friends. So
that's kind of like the ultimate thing about packrafting. Oh, you answered a bunch. Oh, yeah, challenges. What are some, without giving me like specific details, but like, I'm curious about some big challenges you've had with the design, like something that's like really frustrated you and like.
There's a number of things that are frustrating to me, and the big one is how monotonous my job is. Like, I do different things every day, but it is very monotonous when you're trying to move notches around on boats and figure out how boat panels fit together. And you sew it on one machine and it goes together one way. You go give it to the person who I give it to Bree, who sews all the boats, and she sews it the way that she sews it, and they don't fit together as well. And so there's a lot of like fine tuning, and that work is very monotonous. You're just staring at a screen, you're making changes. I wouldn't say it is a challenge. It's not like super hard, but it's just like, well, I've made changes to this boat like 6 times and it's still not done. Why is that? We tried to change our flooring system a number of years ago, and so our boats are sized a certain way. And so I like designed how we're going to put the floor on this one boat in one size. And then I was like, well, I can scale it up to all the other sizes. That did not work. Did not even come close to working at all. And so that was a huge frustration of being like, well, it works on this boat. Why isn't it working on this other boat? Or I'll get feedback from some folks. Well, I'm having trouble doing it this way and it doesn't work and I don't understand. Me personally, I don't understand. And so like, how are we having so much trouble with this? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. We're so good at putting boats together and we can't do this one thing. Like, it doesn't make sense. And so I get frustrated by things like that. And it's not like a frustration at the person or myself. It's just at the situation, and I need to like fine tune it and spend more time on it and try and get it back to like production worthy type stuff.
Did you have like an aha moment with that when you finally did figure out like why the flooring wasn't fitting from small to medium to large?
Oh yeah, totally. And that was a great feeling to know what was going on.
And were you just like, how did, like, what?
It just came to me.
Okay.
Just staring at it. Be like, why is this like not working? Why does the medium fit fine and the large is like oversized? Like you just have to understand, and maybe this is a good answer to your question, but it's just understanding inflation, and it doesn't always make sense. And so we're trying to manipulate inflation where pressure is pushing out on all sides of the product and in an equal amount, and we're trying to manipulate that to create a shape. And so when you size a boat in a certain specific way, it changes other parts of the inflation. And so that part, it just seems like it would be so easy. I'm going to add length to this boat and everything else will be the same. And it's not that way.
Wow. That's really interesting because you think of, it's true innovation. Like you think of like building a car or something, and people have been building cars for years, and they build a car, and I'm sure they come up with ways to do it better, but probably everybody builds cars same way, and everybody builds like puffy jackets the same way. But this is like a whole completely new design process in the last 20 years, basically, that nobody's ever done like this.
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Is it? People...
We're making a performance product. It's one thing to joke that Packrafts are just performance pool toys, but it's essentially what we're making. We're just making an inflatable product and trying to make it performance based.
And they are amazing.
Yeah. And you can go run class 4 or class 5 whitewater if you want to.
Yeah.
And so, we've bridged the gap in terms of the crafts that people were using to run whitewater, like kayaks. And so we've made a boat that's closer to the kayak spectrum, and we've gotten kayakers to use it and fall in love with it. And so those folks can go use it to hike into the Sierras and go run Cherry Creek and some of these hard things where they don't have to shoulder a 60-pound boat into the backcountry. They can now shoulder a 15-pound boat in their backpack. And so it opens things up for people who do run harder stuff. It also opens things up for people like me, though, because I can't carry a kayak. I wouldn't be able to rescue my kayak if I swam because my back is so messed up. So for me, it opens up an entire new sport for me. Yeah. And to have fun and to like push my limits. I'm not class 3 is great. Love class 3. Yeah. But that's like a whole new exciting thing for me. Yeah. Well, think about like the Grand Canyon. If you were to take someone with zero experience to the Grand Canyon, what craft would you put them in? A big one. big boat. You'd put them in a big raft. Yeah. But they couldn't captain that raft. They couldn't paddle it down on their own. They couldn't row a raft down the Grand Canyon on their own without some instruction and practice and all that stuff. You would not put them in a kayak because, the chances of flipping are very high. And so you need to have a skill to operate a kayak in the Grand Canyon as well. But you can take a brand new person who's never been in a boat and isn't as scared of the big rapids and the adrenaline rush and all that stuff. But you can put someone in a Packraft and they can run the entire canyon by themselves with minor instruction. You have to teach them how to get back in their boat and hold on to their gear. Ideally, but you would have a crew of people that could also help them do that. So Packrafting also is allowing people to get into this sport, the sport of river running, without having a lot of experience and being able to build upon that experience so that they can maybe use harder crafts later on. Myself as the example, I started Packrafting. I started doing very easy class 1, class 2 type stuff. thought it was fun, started doing more class 3 with the folks that I work with, and then it turned into, well, I'm getting good at this, I'm going to try harder stuff running class 4, and then it turned into me being like, hey, I actually do want to know how to kayak too. It wasn't the other way around. So.
Well, on a high level then, like, because I don't know that you could explain everything you do, and you can't obviously in one podcast that's in an hour.
Yeah.
So on a high level, is there something that we missed in the process or your design process, or how you, something that we didn't cover?
No, I mean, I think we covered it, but I feel like I just want to say that it's a really big team effort. And so I have a small piece in terms of what we do, and I have a very hands-on approach, and I'm very hands-on to what we make, and I have a lot of influence on how it does get made and all the changes we put together. But, Sheri has a huge influence on that, and Thor has a huge influence on that, and all the people that I work with that manufacture the boats also have a pretty big influence. So, it's a very big team effort. I couldn't do what I do without everybody else, and vice versa. They can't do what they do without me. And so it's just maybe that's getting back to your question of what do I love about working here, is that it is a very team-based environment, and a lot of good ideas, and no one's ideas are turned down, and we just want to make a really great product. And so I love that. I love the people I work with. I love my flexibility. I only live a block from here, but I have a hard time getting here by 9 o'clock in the morning. So, which is just kind of funny, but I also have the flexibility and the freedom to, be here during the shop closure and work on some stuff. While other people aren't around. So.
And you have the flexibility and freedom to go on a trip to Chile for 3 months to go packrafting.
Yeah, totally.
Now, is that primarily a packrafting trip? Like, are you going to packraft the whole time, or are you going to backpack or do anything else?
Yeah, it's a combo. It's like, I don't know, I maybe don't want to say what I'm doing.
Oh, okay.
Well, because then I'm like, well, people might ask me about it. What if I don't go do it? No, but I am going to Patagonia for 3 months. It is mostly packrafting related. I mean, I'm trying to go do a lot of landscape travel with pack rafts and backpacking. I plan on spending quite a bit of time near the northern ice field, and there's some rivers. Some acquaintances that I've met, you and Doom both helped me meet this guy Waldo, and so I'm going to go down and do some paddling with him. Yeah, I'm going to go down and mostly just paddle and try and see some sights and use the product. I mean, that's like a huge part of what I'm doing, is like doing some product testing and being a good ambassador for Alpacka and learning about an area that we don't have a huge presence, but that packrafting is a sport down there that maybe we should have a presence.
So, it's like market research in a way. But,
a lot of it is market research.
But also taking a break from the monotony maybe, and then more creative ideas like your...
Oh, for sure. That is definitely... That's already happened. I'm not even on the trip yet, and I'm already working on a boat, like a new product that I'm going to take down there with me and do a lot of product testing, and that's already fostered all these other ideas in terms of like, what is this product? What are we making it for? And how am I going to use it? And so we just did a testing mission in the Grand Canyon last week, brought some new boats down there just to like get a feel, get them out in the water because it's so low water here. Mm-hmm. And honestly, running the Animas River at the play park at 150 CFS is just not really fun when it's 35 degrees outside.
No.
So we took some boats to the Grand Canyon, and immediately was like, oh, we need to make some changes to this one product, and this other one is pretty good, but there's just like a lot of factors that get involved, and it's really trying to distill all the factors down to what's important, what can we make changes to, and what can we like implement easily. So yeah, I mean, that's like the nature of design, really. Yeah, using the product, getting feedback, seeing what we need to do to make it better. That's why there's a V3 Valkyrie. I mean, I don't know if Thor has talked to you about this.
We talked about fishing and hunting.
So much to Thor's chagrin, we came out with the V2, which was a light years of improvement over the V1. The V1 was like, oh man, this concept is great. The V2 was like, man, this boat is great. Like, we've improved a lot. Thor was ready to be like, yep, we're done. No more innovation on the Valkyrie. There's none needed. Like, the boat's great. And Jeff and I were both very steadfast in, hey, let's find the limit. What can we create? Like, let's lower the volume. And so we made what became the V3. We made a prototype, and kind of funny, we took the one prototype to the South Payette River in Idaho, and we're like, man, this boat is fun. Like, holy crap, this is a huge improvement over the V2. And then we made 2 more, and they sucked. Like, absolutely sucked. And we're like, what happened? Like, and then we go back to the first version of what became the V3, and it was like, okay, maybe we hit the nail on the head in the first shot, and let's make some changes to this product. And
that was the V3.
And that's the thing, is we took all the feedback from that boat, and we're like, made the next versions, and they were terrible. And so sometimes it doesn't work out, and maybe the feedback you're getting, or I'm getting from the people using it and myself, was just not valid.
Or it doesn't translate into design, into how the inflation works, and so many things.
Or like if someone's telling you the boat isn't carving well into eddies, and you think you need to change a design parameter, well, maybe that's the wrong design parameter to change. And so eventually we came up with the V3, and that product is, light years ahead of the V2. The V2 is still a really great boat. I love that boat. That's actually a really good Grand Canyon boat because it has more volume. But the V3 is a better, like, creaking boat. And so there's a reason we went to the V3.
All right, I'm going to stop there because I actually have to meet someone at 4:30 and I'm running a little late.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
thank you.
We could talk for hours on this stuff.
Yeah, I've learned a lot. Thank you. That was really interesting.
Cool.
Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, definitely my pleasure talking about it. I love it. I'm just like, what I wanted to say, actually, I was thinking about this before, is like, I'm not like the face of Alpacka, in terms of, I'm the guy, like, who's behind the scenes, like, making it happen. And so maybe that's like the piece about being like the designer. It's not, Sheri has come up with so many innovations. She's done so much. There's a reason she's like the face of Alpacka in terms of all that stuff. And she gets all the recognition. She honestly deserves way more recognition than she gets.
Yeah.
But, I have no control over that. And so I can only help her as much as I can. And so I do. But I'm the guy who's like sitting here at the computer who's like, you don't see me. You might see me in a product video, but you don't know that I'm the guy designing the boats. And so, or, using the product and things like that. So it's like a really cool thing that I'm like this guy in the shadows, and I just kind of help get stuff done.
Yeah, and make it more efficient.
Yeah, and just make a fun product. I want to use it. I want to have fun with it, just like Thor does, just like Jeff Kramer does, and all the guys. Like,
I do.
There's quite a few. Yeah, of course. There's quite a few of us around here that love the product and use it.
Thanks for listening in on the first full Beginner's Guide to Packrafting episode of 2025. You can download this episode from Podbean or Spotify and head over to our website, www.fourcornersguides.com/podcast to read the show notes. And that's 4 Corners Guides with the 4 spelled out. We're really looking forward to another year of bringing you interesting, fun conversations with packrafters from around the world. Have any suggestions for who you want to hear from? Please send them my way. You can write us at thepackraftinglife@gmail.com. This podcast is a part of our new business, The Packrafting Life, which also includes all things related to the Bikecraft Guide and the Packraft Survey. Okay, thanks a lot.
We all live downstream. We all live down